This is the 10th session, the second virtual one. And at some point, we started experimenting with bringing a certain flavor to our meetup. Like today, it's about storytelling. The way we're going to do that, I will warm you up toward the session from Kathy and Dario. You just try to copy what I'm doing. I will share with you some of the things I've learned from the Meetup course on visual storytelling. I'm just sharing my insights with you, and I interpret stuff that I've heard there in terms of how it could be related to your profession if you're not a designer, but you could use visual storytelling in your profession to for example, explain things clearly or be more convincing when you try to sell your idea or something like that. So visual storytelling. I'm not going to overwhelm you with the theory here, and I will just assume that we are all nerdy enough to agree that storytelling is powerful, and we would love to practice it. So I'm not going to convince you about storytelling. I would just assume that you agree that it's a cool tool and it's good to know how to use that. And instead, I will just share a few powerful insights I've got from the Meetup course. And after sharing those insights, we will play the game. So visual storytelling. On top of that, I have had an interesting conversation with Martin Hausman from Meetup, and we were talking about what is hiding behind visual, and we got into a very deep conversation about frameworks and scaffolds and stuff. And he impressed me with an idea that there are two modes of looking at information. Let's say this is the information here in the middle. And like two modes of interpreting the information. One mode of interpreting of the information is to create some kind of a simplified framework or a scaffolding that is behind the complexity of this information. And he's calling that scaffolding. And then another way to interpret the information to make sense of it is to create a linear story that would explain what is happening there. And that would be a linear story. So that got me thinking that storytelling is basically one of the human methods to interpret information. And then according to the Meetup course, the good story is the one that has a protagonist behind that story. So according to now further the Meetup course, if you have a hero behind that story, then it's even easier for a person to relate to. Because if it's a story about something abstract, then we like, okay, so what? We cannot relate to this. But if we build that linear interpretation of information as attached to someone with whom this is happening, then a person listening to this will be engaged more. And therefore, the first insight is that whenever you're trying to build a visual storytelling, build it around the hero. So that said, define who is the person or the subject of that story, and tell that from his or her perspective. So that would be your story, as told from that person's or hero's perspective. And and I can relate to that, because if you're taking someone's perspective, because you need to build the story around the hero, it also helps you to empathize. We're talking about empathy a lot for the last couple of years or even more. And people say that we all need to become better at empathy, because it's not something that we are intrinsically good at. It's a skill we need to develop. I personally had to develop it because I come from engineering and mathematics, and there is not so much about human in the models. So I really had to learn, what's the perspective of a human in all of this, right? So that said, if you are struggling with empathy, if you're struggling to understand the world through the prism of, let's say, your customer or end user or your colleague or someone from a different department you're working with at the moment, visual storytelling could also help, because it puts a hero in the story. And that is an exercise about empathy. It forces you to think about what would happen to this person in the story. So let's say a customer journey is one of the, in my opinion, visual storytelling methods. That was one of the insights that helped me. And then another good insight from that course was that sometimes a hero could be something from not a living world. It could be a document. So it was like the other aha from the course, because sometimes you can tell a story from the perspective of a document where we give it the qualities of a living human being. So let's say, if you're explaining something happening with the documents in the system, you could say, hey, this is a document Joe, and it starts on this shelf out there, and then it's put into the scanner, and then so on and so on. And then there is a digital copy of Joe, like we are cloning Joe. That was also very insightful, because when we talk like hero, you always imagine a human, like a knight, a princess, but sometimes you can just play with something like that instead. That was also really cool. Did you capture this? Because I'm going to need to switch to the next slide. Yeah? Okay, cool. Yes. Yeah, and I can also read on the chat that some people say it's a bit too dark. Yeah, I cannot fix it at the moment. Sorry. It's just like that. And then on to the next insight. And that's going to be maybe the last one. Well, not actually two more. So we're continuing with the visual storytelling. The next one was that visual storytelling is about pretty much drawing comics, as I understood that. And if you're drawing a story with the help of figures, you also get away sometimes with just, for example, adding text, like speech bubbles and stuff like that. And sometimes you don't even need visuals as much, because you could just, for example, use text alone in your storytelling visually, and just reduce the size of the visual element to bare minimum. And sometimes it could be just pictures without even words themselves, like, two people standing next to each other, and just emotions, and no words used, like, at all. And that was another insights I got from there, meaning that you can be quite creative with how much balance you put between the texts and images. And this is really good, especially if you feel challenged with drawing, right? So you don't have to be an artist. Sometimes you can just, you know, put a small circle and a speech bubble next to it, and that already tells a story. It's especially good when you are on your drawing journey and you plan to become better at drawing, but you're not drawing really well right now. It does not necessarily mean that you cannot fake it until you make it. You could just you could just move your slider to text mostly, but still you use the visual composition to tell it. That was really good as well. And then finally, what I really liked about the course is that it gave a practical approach to building up the shortest possible story, so you don't have to draw pages and pages on your comic book to get a message across. And in a nutshell, the guys from Bicablo gave different setups with a number of frames, starting from 1 to, I think, 6. But I'll take one of the setups, which is built around 4 frames. And I loved it immediately because 4 frames is not too much. It's not too many frames you need to draw, but then it gives you flexibility enough to tell something complex. And the last insight I would like to share with you, that even with 4 frames, you could tell a rich story. And why 4 frames? It's not because you just want some number of frames. Each serves a particular purpose. The first frame is for something they call exposition. The next frame is something they call a challenge. And then the third one is called action, or a turning point. And finally, the last one is the result. That is very useful. We people, I think we like structures and some formulas, and it gives you a nice formula to structure your message or story. And if we get back to the situation with this document Joe, traveling from the shelf to the realm of digital, and the next position could be, oh, here is Joe, you know, lying on his shelf, hanging out with other guys, right? And just like drawing like shelves. And then the challenge, it, for example, cannot travel fast enough between locations. Like that could be the challenge. Why do they want to digitalize Joe? He cannot travel fast. And then the action is that you could draw a cap of the scanner with Joe's arms and legs, you know, sticking out of it, and like, I'm being scanned. And then the result is that the Joe is back to his shelf with his martini, but his digital copy is traveling around the world now. So that could be like one of the interpretations. And as you can see, it's quite a rich story. There is like drama in it. Joe being pressed with the cap of the scanning machine. There is emotion. He was relaxing. Now he's relaxing even more. There is someone else working for him, and there is a challenge. So basically, I was amazed with the fact that actually with 4 frames, you can tell quite complicated stories about our business context that we are supposed to solve as professional in different specializations. I immediately grabbed to and clinged to this format because I before that, I thought that in order to tell something with the help of a comic strip, you really need to work hard to figure out enough frames and stuff like that. But with this approach, you don't need too many of them, right? So that was probably one of the most powerful insights of mine. And it's also the logical transition to the game, because we're going to play the 4 sticky notes game. And before we go there, do you have any questions to this? Does it resonate with you? Does it make any sense? Is it interesting, or am I just, I don't know. Am I indulging myself with this? Yeah, good. Nice. Yeah, and tell me if you want to maybe talk about certain things, or we just jump into the game. Game. All right. So for the game, super. Thank you, guys. For the game, I'm going to use sticky notes. You don't have to. Normally, if we were meeting physically, I would ask you to do so, because if we use the same sticky note size, it would be easy for us to compile that into the final strip. But since we are working with the digital format today, we can just post a photograph of what you're going to draw and just resize it to the sticky note size. But I'm going to use them. So I just now need to find my prompts, because I prepared some nice stories for you. And I will explain the game in a second. Oh, before that, no, actually, no, let's play. No waiting. Let's just do stuff. I'll show you something else in the end. So the first game, or should I? No, I should explain the game first. Sorry about me not being super structured today. I'm defining a lot of things on the fly as we go. So visual storytelling game. How we're going to play it? I'm going to draw 3 frames, which are the exposition, the challenge, and the action, but I leave out the 4th one, the result, as an open-ended question. So the result is something that I don't define. So my prompt is only the first 3 frames. And I will draw them and put them here. And then I give you, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes, something that is long enough for you to draw something, but not too long so that you have this tension of a constraint. And then when you're done, you upload your drawing to the mural board. Okay? And that's pretty much it. So these 3 things, they set the direction, but I promise you it will have a million, the size of the universe of possibilities what can go into the result. At least I hope so. Is it clear? Do you understand the rules? Yeah, cool. And as I said, it's not necessarily you have to draw it on a sticky note. You can draw it digitally. You can draw it on a large space like A4. The only thing is that when you upload it to the mural, we will resize it so it could be fit. But we will figure that out. So the first prompt goes like this. So the game number 1, we will play 3 of them. A circle, a square. I
didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Okay, my Siri doesn't understand me. So these are some abstract characters. And I specifically chose this format so you don't have to struggle with drawing something sophisticated. So as you can see, the exposition was that there were two figures here, like a circle and a square. They maybe met on the street, or maybe they were standing. We don't know. Doesn't matter. That's for you to decide what's the context. And then the circle is like, hey, how are you today? Right? That's the challenge, because suddenly the square is challenged with a question. The status quo is ruined. And then the action. The action is that he starts talking. Or she, I don't know. I just assumed it's he, but not necessarily, right? You can't understand, and then the sentence is not finished. And what happens next is within your power to decide. So you define the end game here. And while you're doing that, let's start with 5 minutes, because I don't know how much time would be adequate, but 5 minutes sounds legit. so let's start with 5 minutes, and then we will adjust if we learn it doesn't work. And in those 5 minutes, what I'm going to do, I'm going to find my smartphone. Yeah, I found it. And I'm going to upload that to Mural. So when you're done, you could add your results to the sequence. So we could have some laughs together. All right. So the time is counting. In the meantime, I'm taking a snapshot, and I'm sending that to the Mural board. So the next round is, it's actually going to be much more challenging, but in a very unexpected way. So the exposition. The exposition goes like this. I can only use text. That's the exposition. The challenge. text alone? But how do I explain a concept of an image? Okay? And then the action. Yeah. Good point, right? How do you do that? Well, what about? And then the suspense. What about you? And that is something you define, the fourth frame. So with this game, we still stick to the same structure. You set up the scene, you define the challenge, and then the action. But then the resulting frame is on you. But you also learn that there are new rules in this game. You cannot use drawings, right? So I'll just give you the third prompt, and then we make a 5-minute break, and you can just use the break to refresh, or if you're interested, you could even try to finish off the prompt. Okay, sounds good? Yeah. All right, the third and the last prompt goes like this. And in this prompt, I'm starting to use like sophisticated drawings. I'm going to draw a person, but it's going to be as simple as a square, a circle, a rectangle, and the sticky for arms and legs. So that prompt is the most sophisticated drawing-wise, but that's the summit of sophistication. So just follow along if you want to, or just wait until the fourth frame and just draw the fourth frame. So the exposition. A sticky man, a horizon, like maybe slightly bored. Then the challenge. Something is spotted on the ground. Okay. But what? And then I'm going to use a technique. I forgot the name when you kind of zoom out. So we can see that that's the same person standing there. But then this thingy that attracted her attention grew much larger. Okay? And that person is still looking downwards, but it's something else. What happens next?